Hi, my name's Alan Mason and I work in medical radiation at ARPANSA. One of my roles there is to develop and disseminate training information, and hopefully some of this would be of use to you. It's good stuff on radiation safety. I have no conflicts and nothing to disclose. What we'll be talking about today and covering is what we're calling the Occupational Radiation Exposure Modules, or ORE. And a little bit of background we'll cover on national uniformity, some stuff on background radiation in general, but you know most of that. So it's more about what the actual modules do, who can use them, why you would use them, options available, and then we'll also briefly touch on, just mention another product we have, which is the radiation protection of the patient modules. As most of you will know, ARPANSA's role, or one of its roles, is to promote national uniformity. And that's not an easy task with the number of jurisdictions we have, with some of them being governed by health and other ones being governed under by the EPA, with the states and territories. It makes challenges all around. So one of the things that we can do is to use some common language and some common understanding. So some of these things that are what we're trying to use and promote when we're talking about using the ORE modules. So it's to try and overcome some of the systemic challenges that we have in regulation, and we want to work both within and with the system to make improvements, and as always we try and do it collaboratively. In some ways we've got a bit of a bonus in that we're not the actual regulator for a lot of say medical facilities, which means that we're not seen as the bad guys. So what we have can be seen and used as and is a service. So why are we concerned about radiation? Well, from the medical sphere, most of the radiation that we're exposed to that's unavoidable, if you like, comes from medical exposures. And it averages out at about the same amount from medical as what you get from all other sources combined. Now, obviously, there are going to be some people who get more and some people who get less, but the point is we're still getting quite a considerable amount of exposure from medical radiation. And as a result, there's also a lot of people that are involved with working in medical radiation. So 95% of the radiation from man-made sources comes from medical. When it comes to occupational exposure, the figures are interesting as well. According to UNSCEAR, there's some 23 plus million workers are exposed annually from occupational radiation, and 75% of those are working in medical. So for most people, the radiation they get is very small, and it's just a consequence of the normal working that they have within the sphere and their operations. But occasionally, if best practice isn't followed, then there can be some issues that arise. So one of the things we want to do is do what we can to try and mitigate those type of things. The other interesting thing we've found is that some staff really worry about radiation, often when they don't have to, and there are some that treat it a little bit blasé and maybe should be paying a bit more attention to ensure they are following international best practice. It's when we start talking about occupational exposure training considerations that things get interesting. So as you know, there are too many medical physicists and really competent RSOs around. Every single facility has access to medical physicists whenever they want, and they've got so much time on their hands that they just spend around with their thumbs twiddling. And not only that, they're such people-oriented people that they spend every available time thinking, how can I spend more time in front of people, talking with them, discussing radiation safety with them, and how can I come up with even better training materials that I can spend hours and hours developing and perfecting so that we can give them the most proficient and up-to-date information. Now, as you can probably appreciate, my tongue was a little bit in cheek with some of those comments. There are challenges with having access to the people with the right qualifications, and that's not necessarily something that's going to be fixed easily or quickly. So to give an example, I attended the RSO training as a participant to see what it was like with ANSTO. Now ANSTO's RSO trainings are excellent and thoroughly recommend them. So it's not an issue with their training per se, but what was of interest was the nature of the people who were attending. The lack of people, or the few people that had scientific backgrounds, was surprising. There were quite a number there that were coming from an arts background, from a business background, from a legal background, that had very little science or no science in their training whatsoever. And here they were training to be a radiation safety officer, where it's somewhat important to be able to understand what it is that you're talking about, not necessarily to be able to study to pass a test, even if the pass mark is relatively high. It still helps if you have a more thorough grounding in the material that you're talking about. Another issue is the quality of the source material, the training material that they use, be it for PowerPoints or for online presentations or learning management systems. There's some pretty good stuff out there. What we've found, and one of the issues and one of the reasons why we developed this, is that it wasn't readily available, and even some of the good stuff wasn't necessarily kept up to date. So we're hoping that you'll find the occupational radiation exposure, the ORE material that we've developed, something that's useful and can help to provide a common language and an understanding to make things better for people across the field. So after talking with a number of people in a number of facilities right across the country, ranging from small to big, etc., we decided that it would be a useful thing to develop. Now these slides are just to give us an indication of some of the development processes. Please don't try and follow them because they were an indicative thing as to what we were and how we went about doing it rather than the actual pathways that we followed. Now, the most common way to launch and to run the ORE training is via ARPANZA's website. So as you'll see from the screen, there are a number of different occupations that they're covered, and each one will give you a slightly different, some different information based on who it is that you are. This screenshot from the online course shows some of the other choices, such as location, the level of involvement with ionising radiation, and, for example, if you work in the areas of nuke med, CT, etc., you can choose those as well. Once you get into the course itself, you'll see that we have ARPANZA's very own Dr. Ivan Williams used as an avatar to help guide you through it, and which, together with a number of animations and other effects, helps to make it an interesting and enjoyable, or we hope, experience for you. Also included throughout are a number of sorting exercises and interactive activities to enable you to better understand and to have it so that it's not just something where you're just listening to some person waffle on. There are also a number of self-evaluations and evaluation exercises as you go through. These serve a couple of purposes. They help to establish whether you understand the material, and because they encourage you to pay attention, they're a very good learning aid. Each of the occupational modules has slightly different information. So for example, if you're a nurse, you don't necessarily need to know what the occupational exposure is of an itinerant worker, but you do want to know what it is that you're likely to be exposed to. So bits of information that are relevant to the professions are included in the occupational components. The activity components cover those parts of a facility that have the different or the specialties in ionising radiation. So for example, nuke med or CT or brachytherapy. If facilities have these, then there's an option to select at the start, as you saw earlier on, to get a little bit more information about these. Now, there are a number of different ways in which you can do the course. You can complete it online, which is probably the most common way of doing it, in which case you fill out the drop-down boxes, select the things that you want, put in your name, and at the very end, once you've completed the course, then you'll get a little certificate of completion. If, however, you've got a facility that has its own learning management system, then that gives you a couple of different options. Or for those people that want to do, say, PowerPoint presentations, then there's the option to download PDFs. There are a number of download options in addition to doing it online through the ARPANZA website. For those with a learning management system, there are SCORM compliant versions. Now, SCORM is simply the protocol similar to HTML that's used for learning management systems, and there's a little bit of work involved in going through and choosing the particular modules that you want, because it's not so easy to work in SCORM as it is to work in HTML. So for those that want to run group sessions, we don't ever want them not to happen. We think the idea of having people coming together and having a question and answer session and looking at some information is fabulous. So for that reason, we offer PowerPoint or some PDFs that can be used for PowerPoints. Again, they need to be selected and put together, and they can also be combined with some of the online material. And then finally, we've got some legal requirements. The legal requirements are pretty simple. They're pretty much saying that we don't want you to change ARPANZA's branding or information on the slides that it's produced or the material it's produced, but we're quite happy for you to top and tail, add material to it, etc., as long as you don't misrepresent what it is we're trying to do. Don't put political campaigns or anything else like that with our material. So it's pretty simple and just makes it easier for all concerned. Finally, I'd just like to mention one other free product that we've developed. This was the predecessor of ORE, and this is our radiation protection of the patient, or RPOP material. This was developed for referrers to give some guidance, if you like, and some information about radiation safety when it comes to referring people, particularly around CTs, but also with the other types of ionising radiation. It's a very simple and quite swift, if you like, online presentation that again you can access from the APANZA website. And one of the interesting things that comes with it is we've developed this little brochure that we call a patient handout that's often used by GPs and other referrers to explain to patients where the radiation dose that they're likely getting fits compared to other things such as background radiation, etc. And that table is often used quite a bit. That's one of the most useful tools based on the feedback that we've developed. So it's while it is more specific in terms of its purpose, the general radiation safety information in there is also useful and has been used for other professions and in a number of different areas. So feel free to check it out. So thank you. If you have any queries or suggestions, feel free to contact me. We think that the information is useful and would like to encourage pretty much anybody that works in a facility with ionizing radiation to have a go and to use it. It's probably a little bit more interactive than most of the types of trainings that you've come across. So please check it out. And again, if you've got any queries, feel free to contact me. Thank you very much. Bye.